Welcome to another exciting and five-star edition of Fight Factor episode. He says 5, I think it's 3. It's something like that. But what a fight card we have for you guys this week. Sorry we're a day late. I am your host. I am the national treasure. I am Lou Betya, joined as I am each and every week by my comrade, my American hero, the Dogfather, saluting me as the national hero. What's going on, man? Weird card last week in that it was almost like so predictable. But another card where not a lot of underdogs really coming through. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, underwhelming card, not a lot of finishes. 11 out of whatever favorites is one underdog one. That was Sam Hughes. And a lot of the fights honestly weren't that exciting, to be honest. So not a lot to say. Just not a fun card. Bets weren't good or bad. Nothing could go my way last week. So one of the worst weeks I've had in a long time, actually, with PFL. But perfect time to make adjustments during kind of like a dry spell of kind of not very exciting cards this week and last week. So it was a perfect time to, figure out where I can clean stuff up and keep going.
I'm glad you brought that up because I want to bring up 2 quick fights from last week. One good, one bad in terms of I think a lot of times we fall into traps, and sometimes I can avoid them, sometimes I can't. I mean, it's it's almost no matter how long I've been doing this for, it seems unavoidable. But one of them I avoided, and this is not a pat on the back, but about 5 minutes before the fight went off, I put a bet on Jai Herbert. It was minus 130 range. I got to the point where so many people were on Bedoya, and I felt like we were overcapping him based on some of his fights at 170. There's going to be a fight on this card we're going to talk about where I think something similar may be going on, but I felt like we were overcapping him. I know Jai Herbert isn't great, but I'm like, man, this is his natural weight class, like 155. Like, he's going to be faster because we had talked on the show about like Bedoya is fast at 170. He's going to lose some of that at 155. And sure enough, he looked good. So I'm glad I made that bet. Where I went wrong, and I just should have listened to you. So maybe that's why I saved this one. Because something you said last week is something that I should have taken to heart, even though it seemed innocuous. When we talked about the Shara Olenjacek fight, I, like everybody else, not everybody, but most of this community were like, fight doesn't go as a safe parlay piece or the unders and you brought up, I thought, Olenjacek's checked out. He's not even really in a full camp. You're like, yeah, but he's only been knocked out like once. And he showed a lot of resolve and toughness. And Shar, he throws flashy offense, but I don't know if he has like super one-hit KO power at this level. And on the flip side, Shara, who was undefeated, he showed a nice chin, nice recoverability in the first. So just looking back, I think I locked myself in this fight, these time props on a Monday. Like, well, that's one of my safest plays, and without just really taking in all the possibilities. So you can always do better. I thought that was one way to look at it, but
yeah, I feel like I actually ended up playing that under early, and then as the week went along and I did more tape, I actually hated it. So I pretty much got out of the position entirely because I had a little bit of CLV. So I had barely any action on that fight after I went back and looked at it.
And the main event seemed to be like the most obvious, predictable plus 110 that's ever existed with the Umar decision. But I don't think he didn't dominate. But that fight going over seemed, should have been minus 800 probably. They'd still
it looked like it. I mean, Corey showed a lot of really good scrambling and stuff like that, but you almost have to think like he was going to improve a lot of his, wrestling defense and back take defense, with his one worst performance in the UFC being with the Aljamain Sterling fight, right, where he gets his back taken off the rip. And that's probably one of Umar's best, positions, is obviously the back take body triangle. He's very good at it.
Yeah. All right, well, we've improved from last week in the fact that I went over these slides multiple times, even added a new one today. So I'm pretty sure they're all right. I'm pretty sure the pictures all add up. I found a picture of Kwang Lee. So, we're good. It's only 10 slides. That should be all right. But We're going to start off. This will probably be a quicker show than usual. This card is not worth it, and there's a couple of fights that I don't think we have an opinion on. But fight number 1 in the strawweight division, we got Stephen Luciano against Toledo Alan Carr, a rematch from the Contender Series that was a draw. Alan Carr wins the first 2 rounds. Luciano, did I do something wrong? No. Luciano with a 10-8 in third. Almost got her out of there. So, Dogfather, the big question. What's changed since the last fight? And do you agree with Luciano now getting steam this week?
No, I don't. I do think that she should be the favorite because, like, she's younger. Like, they're making this rematch for some reason, I guess, from like read more books perspective, that they want the young prospect to get the win back that they thought she deserved, quote unquote, because she had Alan Carr on the ropes. But there's also like another factor in that Alan Carr did take the first fight on short notice, which is why we saw, in my opinion, such a big cardio dump. I do think she does have some gas tank issues because she was breathing pretty heavily in the Rani Dos Santos fight, but I think it's a little wide because there is, grappling path here. And, I do think Alan Carr has a lot of holes. I think she's hittable. She is good at grappling, though. Her takedown entries aren't that bad. Her takedowns aren't that bad. She can get on top and get a body triangle and win the majority of a round. She has decent ground and pound when she goes to it. And even in like her no-gi jiu-jitsu career, she was really good on top in half and does a good job at knee cutting. She even got mount in round 2 in the last fight and lost mount position. So if she doesn't lose that position, that fight might look a lot different. So I do think it's a little wide, clear grappling path, different factors going into it. Luciana's been off for a minute, so maybe she's improving. But ironically, Alan Carr has been the one that's actually a little bit. Alan Carr is the greener MMA fighter from their career trajectory. She's only been fighting MMA professionally since 2021. And Luciano's debut is at like 20. When she was like almost 19, 20 years old, maybe even younger. So if there's a lot of factors going into it, and Alan Carr was a -250 favorite the first time, and we saw how that played out, and it did play out pretty. In my opinion, it played out like a pick'em, to be honest, until Alan Carr gassed and she's on the full camp. So I do think the line's a little wide, but I don't really want to step in front of Luciano because she's massive. She's young. She has a lot of upside that I think people are baking into this line, but to a point that there are other factors that you kind of have to give to the Alan Carr side as well that, kind of balance this thing out.
I'm actually, the one thing that stuck out to me is whether or not the fighters have changed. I feel like since this fight, the judging has had so much more of an emphasis on damage and not really awarding a lot of control. So on the Alan Carr side, for me, how you judge deep submissions, they judge, but they don't really, submission attempts aren't really getting a lot of stuff. So I'm actually kind of debating an under 2.5 here. I don't love it. I haven't gotten there yet, but I feel like with Alan Carr, if she's more aggressive on the ground, like you said, if she gets in a mount, she can land a lot of punches. She can get Luciano to turn over. Maybe she can get a choke. And on the Luciano side, I think now you come into this fight, you know exactly what you're game planning for. You've seen it. You've had 2 full rounds of what it's like to grapple with her, and then you see what she gets tired. If Alan Carr struggles to get takedowns early, I mean, this feels very one-way traffic on the feet. So I think, and Luciano almost got a finish in that Contender Series fight. So at least I'm looking at the under. I don't feel like I want to get involved with this fight, but if people keep parlaying the over and this number either stays like this or it gets better, maybe a small play, but nothing about this fight really excites me. But we will move on to fight number 2. Jarno Aaron's coming off a decent win against Stephen Wynn, against Yusuf Zalal, made his return, wiped the floor with Billy Q. Very impressive performance. Zalal, the biggest favorite on the card, or maybe Gutierrez is at this point. Gutierrez, it's close. Right around there. But Zalal -350 right now. Just to the over here, understandably. I'll start this one off first since I brought up the top of the show. Is this a classic case of overcapping a win like we had with Zalal over Billy Q? I'm very curious to hear your take on this. But
Yes, because because it also kind of takes away some of the factors that maybe people didn't pick up in the Stephen Nguyen fight that I thought I picked up in tape. I saw Jarno do some things that he didn't do in his prior fights. He actually lifted his league leg to check. He was more aware of calf kicks in that fight. He was switching stances into southpaw after combinations so he could get his lead leg out of the way as he's, exiting, which is something that, it takes away that lead calf kick if you exit and step out into southpaw as an orthodox fighter. When he got taken down, he went right to butterfly hooks and, dug double unders to try to elevate. So there's some things that I saw personally from my perspective as somebody who's been around the sport for a while that he did that showed improvements to me. Now, to the market, he clearly, Aaron's hasn't made any improvements. So I do think we are overcap. I think we're overcapping Zalal to a point, but I also think there's a lot of it's undervalued. I think it's more undervaluing how good Jarno is and can be, because he has all of the tools to be a very, very, very competitive fighter in this division because of all the things that he does well. Now, if you look at the takedown, him, giving up takedowns in his fight, I agree. And looking bad off his back, I agree. But he was on the ground in the Nguyen fight. Nguyen had the opportunity to go to the ground with him, but Jarno didn't really give him the opportunity to settle in guard because if you notice, he goes right to butterfly hooks. So there are things that I picked up in Jarno's game from tape that I thought he did make some improvements on. However, Zalal is making improvements as well, and he has a clear path in this fight, and historically he's gone to that time and time and time again in his UFC career. However, if he doesn't get takedowns, it seems like at times he's not really, really excited to stay on the feet for extended periods of time. So I agree that, he's looked good, he's looked improved, but his game plan is he wants to grapple a lot of the time. From my perspective, he always goes to it. And if he's not finding success here and there are extended periods on the feet where he's having to bang it out with Jarno, I don't think that's good for him.
Yeah, I mean, if this was just a straight up kickboxing match, I think you line Aaron's probably
55% maybe, yeah. Slight favorite.
Yeah. So Zalal, the only two times he hasn't had 2 takedowns or more in his last 6 fights, one against Damone Blackshear, and that was a weird fight because he came on strong in the 3rd round, didn't really need a takedown, was just piecing up Blackshear. And then Tybura, very understandable why you probably wouldn't want to grapple him. That was years ago. Yeah, that's the problem here is I feel like, I don't love using this term, but Aaron's feels like the value loser of the week here. And if you have like a +3.5 on him, somebody's going to give Zalal a 30-27 and the other guy's get a 29-28 and you hate it. But do you before we move on, I mean, I don't think Zalal has finishing equity here. I know he's coming off a sub on Billy Q, but Aaron's is a pretty tough dude. On the feet, I don't think he's Zalal. You'd have to sub him.
Yeah, I think it's a submission. I think it's like a back take or an arm triangle. I mean, there are times when Jarno's looked a little suspect on the mat, so I wouldn't be surprised if, Zalal got his back and submitted him. I think that from the market's perspective, as well as like an obvious way that this fight finishes too, that wouldn't surprise me. He's not going to KO him on the feet unless it's like some, fluky, I wouldn't call it fluky, but just like a flying knee or something, like a head kick, because Jarno is pretty durable. I don't really think Zalal can do it with the hands because he just doesn't really have hands like that. I mean, ground and pound would be the only way a KO hits on the Zalal side, and I think the submission is probably the most likely way this fight finishes. I mean, Aaron's could probably KO him, but
plus
I would say probably
on the sub for Zalal.
I mean, Aaron's could KO him, but I don't really see it. I mean, here Aaron's hurts like pretty much everybody in his fights. If you like at this level, like he hurt Gomis with the straight right, he hurt Choi with a nasty uppercut. He hurt Nguyen like 3 or 4 times. Would not surprise me if this was an extended period of the fight and he ended up hurting Zalal at some point, which is why there could be a lot more value on Aarons than people think, because all it takes is, one big left hook, one big uppercut, and he clips Zalal and hurts him a little bit, and then all of a sudden you have a 50-50 round with control and damage, with like him getting hurt one time, and ends up being a lot closer fight than people think. So I do agree that Zalal is like historically been really durable, but his defense is not the best.
Aaron's live might be worth a look too, depending on if it's a competitive first round. But
well, yeah, you could also see how Aaron's is, if Aaron's ground game has evolved at all, and if Zalal is even getting takedowns, because if he's not, his cardio, like both of these guys' cardio is like pretty similar level. So if it does play out close where you think Aaron's is going to stuff takedowns early, it could be more competitive. So.
All right, well, we'll move on. And by the way, you have not yet either noticed or complimented me on, I learned how to flip the pictures in Canva for our fighters on the right, so they are facing each other now, which I thought was very important for the presentation of this. Well, you just need guys. I mean, how many guys can be on the left on the UF? Come on the site. We got Carl Williams against Janata Denise at the heavyweight division. Denise coming off. Yeah, you're going to have to trust Dogfather and I when I tell you that he beat Austin Lane by a round 2 KO, because apparently the footage has been erased off the face of the earth. I remember it. I'm sure Dogfather remembers it. Just trust us. That fight actually happened. And Carl Williams coming off decision against Tafa. I have 2 questions here. And the answer to the first one is yes. So I'm just having you agree. Is this the most binary fight that's like, I don't think you can get a more binary fight than this. But more importantly, what makes this different than how the Tafa fight went, with a guy with serious power that really can't stop a takedown?
I mean, I guess like it's assumed that Denise can't stop a takedown because Lane got him down. I mean, that's pretty damn obvious, but to be honest with you, looked like it was like the first 5 or 10 seconds of the fight, and he wasn't even like mentally prepared for the takedown. And then all of a sudden you have a former defensive lineman shooting a takedown across the cage at you, who's 275 pounds, and he just pretty much just got speared into the mat. Obviously there's no get up game there, but I saw some things that he was at least trying. He's digging underhooks, trying to butterfly, trying to shrimp, trying to get some butterfly hooks, trying to shrimp out. Like, he was trying to get up, but Lane is just too big and strong and fresh when he's early that like, let's be real. I mean, don't think Lane's the best, but has anybody got up under Lane? Like, I'd have to really, really go back deep into tape and see if anybody's even got up under Lane, like when he's fresh in a fight, when he's gotten a takedown. Because I think there's a couple times that he's just absolutely brutalized guys with ground and pound early in fights when he does get a takedown early. I'm pretty sure that's how he got in the UFC. So I do think it could be a little bit different than the Tafa fight, because I think that he has better. I think Denise has better cardio than Tafa, and Williams. I know a lot of people think he's like this grindy wrestler guy, but his cardio is not the best when he's not having his way in fights. You saw it in the Sherman fight, and it just so happened that he grinded out Lucas Bresky, has even worse cardio than Carl Williams. So it just so happened that he got round 3 because he just started grinding on him. But in parts where, they were standing on the feet and Bresky did get up, I mean, it wasn't pretty. And he's never been able to stuff takedown. Tafa's never been able to stuff a takedown. And he threw a random head kick and got himself taken down in round 2 of that fight. And Williams had a ton of grappling success and still won 29-28. So it's a damage versus control argument that we talked about in the first fight of the night. Would it shock me if this fight goes to the scorecards and there are extended periods where Denise is landing really, really big and he's sitting in half guard and Denise is trying to work his way up while Carl's trying to keep him down, and this ends up being a lot closer than people think, and we have people screaming robbery on both sides at the end of this fight if it does go to decision, which it's expected to. So I am very interested in how this fight plays out. I actually think that Denis' takedown defense isn't that bad because he actually showed how to sprawl in the lane fight, which is shocking. I don't think Bresky or Tafa sprawled once in their fight. So if there is something that I can take from Denis's tape in a small sample size, that is he's younger in MMA. He showed me that he knows how to sprawl at least. I think I've ever seen Bresky sprawl once. I don't think I've ever seen Justin Tafa sprawl once. At least I got that. So I do think there are some things that like I'm picking up that at least Denise has some idea of what's going on. But yes, this fight is super binary. And I do think it could go a lot differently than the Williams and Tafa fight if Denise is improving his ground game, which he could be able to.
You brought up something, and I'm not sure if we talked about this or just in the Discord streets yesterday, but I've seen people interested in playing Denise in the distance, and I don't know. I mean, it's like a 10-cent difference, but we had talked about this Denise decision is kind of an interesting look because Carl Williams has shown he's pretty tough. He's pretty durable. He does fade late. One thing that I liked about Denise in the Lane fight, I know that's the longest fight he's had as a professional, as an MMA fighter. I know in kickboxing he's had longer fights. But there's a similarity between the first round of that fight with Lane and what I think the first round of this fight's going to look like. And that is laying on top, but not throwing a lot. And more importantly, not making your opponent expend a lot of energy. And with Carl Williams, we talked about, I don't think he has great control. You're going to gaff somebody if you're just mat returning them left and right. Like, I understand that. Get up, get thrown down. But Carl Williams, his strike totals are terrible. I mean, he gets the takedown. He's not really doing anything. He's like taking a knee in the fourth quarter, just burning clock. If he's just going to do that against Denise, I mean, what happened in the second round of that Lane fight? He actually stopped the takedown, and then he belted him. So his power was fine after 5 minutes of being grounded. Why can't it be fine after 10 minutes here? Even if he gets taken down both rounds and doesn't get up, he's not really being forced to do a lot of work. Now, I say all that. If he does get taken down in the second round, his corner may have a lot more urgency. Like, look, man, you can't go down 2-0. Like, you got to move. Maybe he does expend a lot more cardio, but so would Williams. And then that third round would be really, really, really interesting and dicey here. But I'm with you. I don't think this plays out as simple as it's binary, but I don't think it plays out as simple as people think. I think Denis' decision, which is it's a bonkers number. It's like 9-1 or something.
Yeah, we might get
way off.
Well, now that maybe if people actually agree with us, they'll play it after listening to the show. So we'll screw ourselves from a better number on domestics. But yeah, we could get something like plus 1,000, plus 1,100. And to be honest with you, like Williams, has shown to be super durable. He can be hurt in his fights, but as soon as he gets hurt, he like runs away or also just shoots right into a takedown. So yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, if Denise is stuffing takedowns because he at least showed some idea in the second round of the Lane fight of how to stuff takedowns, this could go a little bit differently than people think. I mean, I am worried about him getting on bottom because that's obviously where he looks the worst. But from his actual takedown defense, from what I saw, it didn't look like the worst thing ever. And one thing that we're noticing in MMA now that's been a trend is people know how to defend takedowns a lot better than they used to. So if I see somebody that knows how to get a wizard, and Lane was on the cage trying to cage wrestle him, and he gets right to the wizard and goes right to fighting his wrist and lowers his base. There are little things like that, as times progressed in MMA, people are learning more and more and more how to defend takedowns, and just how to grapple. Now, will Denise bridge the gap? I don't know. That's why the line is what it is.
Yeah, that's one of the more interesting fights on this card. I'll say that. This to me is not one of the more interesting fights in this card. Bantamweight, we got Carol Olivas on his pod said, we're in America, say Rosa. So for Olivas, I will say Carol Rosa against Pani Kianzad. Rosa minus 175 favorite. The over is absurd, of course. I have no questions here. I have nothing. So floor is yours. I have
It's
nothing. I'm
it's
not
uh
betting this
it's
fight.
it's Carol Hossa. She's Brazilian.
I
Let
don't know,
her
man. I
let her
trust
keep
the
her
labels
accent.
here.
There's no way Brandon Olivas is doing anything to me. Fuck you. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I don't really care about this
The
fight at
show's
all.
sponsored by Fight Ready, by the way, just in case. No.
I love you, Brandon. I hope you watch this, buddy. But yeah, I don't really care about this fight, to be honest. But I do think that Hossa is probably the more well-rounded fighter. Well, not probably. I think she is, but I mean, a lot of this is just kind of baked into Panty being done. I don't really like her boxing's really good and it's crisp, but she doesn't really sit down on anything. Sometimes she looks a little like she doesn't want to get in the fight, and I guess Rosa does a little bit, but I think there's a lot of like over evaluation of her just like kicking the inside leg of Aldana for 15 minutes and then getting absolutely pieced up in the boxing for 15 minutes. So like that's great. That's great and all, but she made no adjustments in that fight. Not a single adjustment. All she did was just try to kick her legs, and what else? Like she probably has a grappling upside over Kianzad like she did against Aldana. She didn't take that at all. And when I see that on like a minus 200 favorite, I immediately want to fade them because I know she's not going to be willing to make adjustments. Like she got pretty much washed by McMahon in the grappling, and in round 3 of that fight, she's trying to grapple McMahon. What are you doing? What are you doing? Like there's just stuff that happens with Rosa where I'm like, dude,
I mean, she was dominated those first 2 rounds in the grappling. Like,
dominated. And then
dominant.
she tried to grapple McMahon. So I was just there's just stuff that she does like that. I'm going, I can't trust this girl. Like I know she's younger. I know everybody thinks Panty is done, but did Panty get washed by Chesson? Who cares? Like Panty losing to Vieira, who cares? She got wrestled by Vieira. Like the Landsberg performance wasn't great, and some of her other performance wasn't great. But honestly, Rosa hasn't put together a good 15-minute performance at this level yet to make her this big of a favorite. So don't really agree with the line. But I don't think I'll get there, to be honest, like every other fight in this card.
Yeah, I got nothing to add to this. So we're going to move on. Welterweight, we got Danny, the left hand of God, Barlow against Nikolai Veretanikov. Not the longest name on this card. That comes next. I'm glad that UFC gave me the black and white photo. I always like it when they give me at least like the almost photo, as I like to call it. Danny Barlow coming off an okay win against Josh Quinlan. I want to say, I don't know. I don't know what to make. I don't know if it's going to age well. I don't know how, what people really think of Quinlan at this point. And then we got a UFL win against Ashley Reese for the Nikolai side here. My question to you is something I was actually just talking to our dear friends Pirate MMA about. It's hard for me to justify this tag on Barlow, which I'll get to as why in a second, but I can't get to a click on the other side. So why is that? For me, I'm going to start with this one. I got to start one of these, I suppose. I mean, look, is Barlow's weapon good? Yeah. But he not only, I mean, he seems limited. We haven't seen his takedown defense really tested. But even in the Quinlan fight, the one thing I noticed is by the second round of that fight, he's actually holding his left hand like elevated. Like he's telegraphing it so much. Like he's telling Quinlan, like, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And if Quinlan had any sense to grapple, I mean, maybe that would have been the hint. Like, hey, dude, it's like bald bull doing the charge, like taking 12 steps back and bull rushing. Like, the bull rush is coming. You have to hit him in the gut and he goes down. I don't know if this is a habit that Barlow really has had for a while, but I definitely noticed it in the Quinlan fight. The problem I have is I'm not really sure what Nikolai is going to do here to cover this number. He doesn't throw a lot of volume. He's taking the fight on short notice. I don't love his cardio. He seems to be okay at everything. Jack of all trades type. But I think Barlow has all the optics. Now, the over being minus 215 is interesting as well, because when you have a guy that is so one-dimensional that has that power, you tend to, and especially at 170, I think you would tend to think this would play under. But I just don't love the tag on Barlow. I think it's way more. I made these slides yesterday. I'm pretty sure this number is even more. It might be higher than 300. It is, yeah, it's minus 350 at the moment. So any justification to bet the Nikolai side here, or is this just kind of a total pass, like another value loser?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, Quinlan landed on Barlow pretty clean in round 1 from southpaw, like a nice 3-2 or 2-3 over the top, because Barlow doesn't really use like a high guard shell. So I think you can get in on the inside on him a little bit, but he's a really good distance manager. And Nicolau will kind of crash the pocket. He's very physical. He has the one thing that's like just brutal that Nikolai does is his knees in the clinch. And we haven't really seen anybody just try to like out physical Barlow yet. He does look very physical. He's very big and strong. Obviously, a very good kickboxer. Uses a lot of different angles and strikes well. So I do think at distance, Barlow is definitely the better striker. But I am more interested in how this plays out in tight, in the clinch, where Nicolau is his best. I mean, he has several clinch knee finishes. And even in his LFA fight with I think it's Steve Rogers, he hurt him as well to the liver side with a knee. So that's Nicolau's, in my opinion, his best quality is just him being he's just kind of a brutal guy. He's really physical. He's big. He's pretty good everywhere. I do think the line is wide as well. I do think Nicolau is undervalued here. I might get to a bet, but I do kind of feel like, because how hittable Nicolau is, and how I don't know if Barlow is going to respond well to him when he is in the clinch with him, I do think the under is probably the way to go. Either a 2.5, because he has shown that he slows down a lot in his fights and it's on short notice. I think playing like an under 2.5, now that the over is taking a lot of steam, we could probably get like a plus money under 2.5, and I think that's where I want to go.
It's minus right now, and I haven't seen a prop for this. I'm just looking at fight odds. Fight doesn't go the distance is minus 150.
What's fight ends by KO? That would probably be an interesting way to play this one personally.
They don't have a just that prop listed here. They have Barlow's plus 115 and Varetnikov's plus 600. But under 2.5, you're probably going to get minus 120, 115. So it's not terrible.
Yeah, like fight to end by KO or under 2.5, I feel like would be the way I want to play this fight.
All right, well, we will move on. I wish I had Wheezy. It's Greek. This is his wheelhouse, man, saying this name. I'll do my best as an Italian. Charalampos Grigorou. I feel like that was all right. That's as good as it's going to get on this breakdown. Facing Toshiomi Kazama. They're killing me this week. I mean, not only is it like a mid card, but they're killing me with these names. Where's Burt? Bantamweight fight 135. Grigorou, more than a 2XX favorite here. I believe this is the thinnest under on the card, under 1.5 plus 105. You don't have to answer the first part of it. The answer, again, I'm just front loading these with yeses. Obviously, it's the coolest name ever. A lot has been made about Kazama just getting mopped up immediately. And a lot has been made about Grigorou's cardio completely fallen off a cliff in his last fight. Can Kazama survive long enough to test it?
I don't know. I have no idea, to be honest.
You know what? Let me back it up and ask this question. Gun to your head, over or under 1.5?
Under.
Okay, so then you don't think Kazama survives the first?
I mean, I think if he gets him down, he can submit him though too.
Okay.
I mean, he's a pretty tricky grappler, man. Like, I think I get that like this dude's at Sarah Longo and all that, and he like tried to shoot takedowns on like Chad Anheliger, but dude, Chad Anheliger has terrible takedown defense, and like he couldn't even keep him down. Like we watched Jose Johnson scrub Anheliger in the grappling, and this dude can't even get like Anheliger down for like 2 seconds. So yeah, I get this dude's at like Sarah Longo, that's cool and all, but he's not a grappler. And he's going to have a hard time keeping up with Kazama if they do get to the mat, especially in the jiu-jitsu realm. So if it does go over, I feel like Kazama is having grappling success. But I also feel like if it goes under, I wouldn't be surprised if this dude who's 26 turned 27 shows up a little bit improved after like a year-long layoff versus this 33, 34-year-old gassy kickboxer, you know, doesn't bonk him with a giant overhand in the first 5 minutes. People are going to be a little surprised what this looks like. So I don't think Kazama is that bad. I mean, to be honest, like if a lot of his fights, like he comes out, and especially in his like regional tape before he got to UFC and got nuked by Renya, which is like, I don't really take anything away from that fight, to be honest.
That's a forgivable loss.
Forgivable loss. And to be honest, like man,
like what was he going to do? He couldn't grapple with him. So like he was kind of screwed there, just all around.
Yeah, and I mean, even Armfield, right? It's like Armfield's a really, really hard guy to grapple too. So I don't know how much success Kazama will have grappling like Gregorio. Like it's hard to say, you know, because his takedown defense like at this level hasn't really been tested. And I don't think Kazama's like a good wrestler. He's more of like a judo jiu-jitsu style guy when it comes to his takedowns.
Would you say Armfield has more power than Gregorio?
I think he does not, but he's a much better striker.
Okay.
Much better. And he has much better takedown defense historically too. So well, I think he has much better takedown defense from what I've seen at this level. So yeah, I mean, outside of that, you know, I'll be honest, like the UFC wasn't really planning on this Gregorio guy to being here anyways. Like they put Smotherman on the Contender Series to beat him.
Into bonk.
And they just landed like a right hand, and you know the ref stopped the fight, like because Smotherman gets hurt in every single fight, and it just so happened that he couldn't come back from that one. So yeah, I'm not really bullish on Gregorio at all, to be honest. If you're gonna force me to bet on this fight, I'm gonna bet on Kazama because he's younger, and he has like
and he's probably fighting for his job. Probably fighting for his job at this point.
Yeah, like I think Gregorio does obviously have like gigantic favorite upside, and like maybe he just like stuffs takedowns and beats him up, and you know Kazama's like the worst to ever do it. But I don't know. I'm not going to give up hope in this guy. I think he has some pretty good intangibles if he doesn't get knocked out here.
Yeah, I think if this thing gets, I mean, I would favor anything over 1.5 on his side. But yeah, I don't think this is like Grigorou round 1 KO. Also, if it happens, I'm deleting this video. But
yeah,
so
I mean,
these are a little out of order.
If it happens, let's be real, we wouldn't be surprised. But I do feel like Kazama could be like a pretty decent live bet because he goes for it at least, especially as fights get extended. So
I know this is the co-main event, but I just replaced the Nascimento Filio slide with this one. Got Chris Gutierrez again. It's a very, very short notice replacement. Kwang Lee, who was supposed to fight on the Contender Series, so he was in camp. So he's not like just they're picking him off the streets to do this. Undefeated, another bantamweight fight. I mean, this is the simplest question I have. Can he look 350? I know Jonathan Martinez can look minus 350 as a leg kicker. Can Chris Gutierrez here? And is it that simple?
I don't know. I mean, Gutierrez is good. Obviously, whenever you see him priced at this line, it's kind of makes you go, what is happening? Kwang's pretty good. I better him in LFA a couple times. Pretty dangerous striker. Okay boxing. His defense is kind of lacking, to be honest. He can grapple a little bit. So, yeah, he's probably the side at the line. I don't really see Gutierrez covering this price, but he's the much better striker, much higher level of competition, much more technical. Not really much of a get-up game or defensive grappling. His jiu-jitsu's all right. So, yeah, I mean, I don't really have much of an interest in this fight. Hopefully they give us like a cheeky over because Quang has a lot of early finishes, which would be kind of nice because I think Gutierrez is a really, really good neutralizer. So that's probably how I'm going to look at this fight. I think because of the unknowns on the Lee side and all the early finishes that he has, they might favor the under a little bit. So I'm hoping that we get something like a nice, maybe an even money Gutierrez decision would be fantastic. Or like a decently priced over 2.5 is probably the way I'm going to look at this fight. So I think he could look like a pretty decent sized favorite though. Obviously, like greater than 75%, you're kind of like, ew, that's gross. But I also think we kind of overlook the fact that, wow, this guy beat his ass. He's minus 300. That was free. But also, there are some fighters that just have slim margins from how they fight. So a guy like Gutierrez, he's not going to look 350, but if these guys fight 10 times, how many times do you think Gutierrez wins? Yeah. Now that's the more, in my opinion, that's one of the other things you have to bake in, because how guys fight they're not always gonna cover, right?
I mean, there's lots of guys that give up the first round. That's just the way they're wired. So 29-28 is a standard win.
My example I always use is like a guy like Taylor Lapilus, right? He's, in most cases, he is more skilled than who he's fighting, or at least the Loughran and the Stamen examples, kind of where I'm looking at, because that's not his style. He's not going to cover minus 275, but he probably wins the Stamen fight 75 to 80% of the time, despite him winning a clear but close 30-27 when he gives up a couple takedowns. But if you watch that fight back, you're going to watch that fight and be like, damn, this guy probably wins like almost all the time. So I think we have to kind of like rethink about each fight and how we go with the thought process of like, oh, can this guy look minus 350? It's like, well, he's like a point fighting kickboxer.
Right.
He's not going to look 350, but he's going to probably
do whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever Dagestan Poppy tells me to do here, I'm going to do, because I know he's like the Kwang Lee whisperer.
So. Oh yeah, he'll whisper into our ear the Kwang Lee. The Kwang Lee sweet nothings.
All right, I can't believe this is this is on a main card, but here we are. Yana Santos back again, looking better, looking at least in better shape than we've seen her recently, against Chelsea Chandler. Santos is a small favorite. Before we get to the question, I did not expect this fight to be kind of the weird, I don't want to say Twitter war. I feel like war is maybe overdoing it for this fight, but I am surprised by how balanced the picks seem to be, as I feel like most people were just going to abstain from picking this fight at all. But I know where you're at on this fight, and that's why I wrote this question, because I know the side you're on here. As bad as she's looked recently, is she completely more skilled than Chelsea Chandler?
No, because I don't think I've ever seen her, like, I don't think she even knows how to throw a punch sometimes when I watch her fight. Like, I just watch her fight and I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, how did she beat Ketlin Vieira? And then you rewatch the fight and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. But then at that same, like, in that same hand, my first thought is whenever I kind of try to forget about fighters' games, what they do before I go into tape. And I don't even need to go into tape to know what Santos is going to do when she fights and what her win condition is. And when I look at the cage pressing exchanges between Dumont and Chandler, who is also another very physical woman who's very strong and does use cage push a lot in her fights, Chandler was having a lot of success in pinning Dumont against the cage. And the reason she lost that fight was because she was taken down in rounds 2 and round 3. But she was
and the
doing
optics of the first round and running away. There's the optics.
Yeah, I mean, that was in like but that's like the first 30 seconds of the fight, right? It's like the funniest thing is I forgot that happened in the first minute of that fight. And if you erase that first minute, you have a completely different perspective. The casual fan has a completely different perspective of that fight, you know?
Well, you brought up somebody. I mean, Norma Dumont is somebody who fights on thin margins as well. So,
yeah, just like, I mean, the only reason why Norma Dumont won that fight was because she was landing takedowns. But Norma Dumont also outstruck Carol Rosas pretty clearly in their fight, and Chandler was having some success on the feet there, landing her left hand. So I think there's like minute things that I'm looking at in this fight that lead me to believe that Chandler is the side at plus, because both of these girls have looked awful off their back historically, and both seem to be pretty even when it comes to like the physicality and how they handle like clinch exchanges. So I have to think this fight's pretty even, and it could almost be as funny as who gets on top first. You know, both don't really have the best wrestling. They're both pretty old, actually. Santos is only 34 and Chandler's 33, but she's much younger.
Watch it with the age shit.
Oh, well, they're old for MMA standards. You know what I mean? But Chandler obviously has a lot less experience, so she could make some improvements at this level. Like, I don't know, it just seems like a bit of a mess of a fight, and it's kind of a funny fight to blame. Like, I don't think anybody is planting their flag on this fight. I think they're just making bets because they think Chandler sucks, right? Or Santos is old and or Santos is old and washed, and she just had a kid, and she's a bum too. So I don't really care about the fight, to be honest with you. I just see some upside in Chandler, and she's plus money. I don't even know if I'm going to bet it because it just seems like the worst. Like, do you really want to lose your money on this fight? I'm good.
Yeah. I mean, if you have to bet, this is kind of the fight where if the lines were flipped and you had Santos at plus 125, I'd be like, that's probably the side. But we got a co-main event. The road to the title continues for Chepe Mariscal. It's supposed to be Dan Ige in this spot. But I don't know if we want to say that he's awesome. He's the beneficiary of some rather good fortune, including a technical submission. I had to write to my sportsbook and be like, hey, you got to grade it as a submission. Or I think they had graded it wrong. But Chepe Mariscal getting a co-main. Well, he's not the co-main event, I guess. But for a day this week, Dogfather, he was in the co-main event of this card. He's going against Damon Jackson, doing his best blue steel pose in this picture. Mariscal, at least to me, a rather surprisingly 2XX favorite. And that's going to lead to my question for you. And I know these are different styles. But Chepe, I mean, I don't think he won the Charrier fight. I don't know a lot of people. I know people that if they had a ticket on him, they think he won. But I don't think he won that fight. And now he comes in against a guy with a lot of experience who striking isn't great, but definitely a dangerous submission guy. Should he be this? Is this line crazy? Like, why is it so different now?
I think the line on, I think referencing back to the Charrier line, which was like slight favorite Charrier or near pick him at some points. I think because how Charrier fights, he constantly fights on slim margins a lot of the time. So he's kind of an easy guy that a lot of folks, see Chepe's game. They know what he's doing. They know what he's in there to do. And if he's plus to a guy who has small margins, they're going to technically go to fade him. And, it was an all right bet at plus, 120, whatever. I thought Charrier won and looked like a slight favorite. But, Chepe at plus money was the right side. I mean, he won the fight every single time you click a plus and it wins. who cares? I think in this particular matchup, though, from a market perspective, Chepe seems to have pretty good defensive grappling, which is Jackson's, in theory, best path to win here. Jackson is a pretty decent striker. Like, he does everything well. He calf kicks. He's huge for the weight class. He's look maxing with his new hairline and his tan, so maybe that's bullish. I don't know if he's mewing, but I could DM him and ask him if he wants a mewing tutorial.
Isn't that
Outside of that,
isn't that Pepe's expertise?
is Pepe look maxing now? I think so.
No,
And
the mewing. I think he's the first guy I ever heard mentioning that, like, over.
I
and
don't
over
know.
again.
I think you'd have to ask we'd have to get some before and after jawline pictures to figure out if he's look maxing the jawline, most importantly. But yeah, we'll have to look into it. But from a market perspective, though, I think Chepe historically has really good like submission defense and pretty good defensive grappling, which is Jackson's obvious path. But from like I guess just like a durability standpoint and a cardio standpoint, and just I guess it's probably wide, but I've backed Jackson a bunch of times in the past when he's been a big dog, and I personally just don't think this is like the most favorable matchup for him. Because from like just a hardware standpoint, like in my opinion, it does lean to Chepe pretty heavily. So I think the line is not really I don't think it's that wide, to be honest. I don't like the line. I'm not going to bet it, but I think there are better matchups for Jackson to play him as a dog, and I don't think this is probably the one for me.
Do you see a finish either way here?
Yes, I think this fight finishes, but I also don't want to play minus 105 or whatever it's at. So, because I get that Jackson could get like out. I think he could get Homer Simpson here, obviously, but like he's pretty tough, like he's been chinned, but he's only been chinned by like big, one punch, one hitter quitter type guys, He hasn't really been KO'd by many guys who have Chepe's power.
Yeah.
And I don't think Chepe's like a power guy. He's like an attritional dude. And I don't think that's going to work.
Volume.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to work with Jackson, because Jackson's going to go to, if he's flurrying on him, he's just going to go for takedowns.
I don't like doing this to my guy, Damon Jackson, but I was debating maybe a Chepe round 3 play might be worth it if you think that Jackson's going to fade in this fight. Because I think Jackson, if he's going to win, he's probably got to get a takedown in the first round. He's probably going to get some control. The nice thing about Damon Jackson, at least when you bet him, he is not content to just win minutes on the ground. If he gets control, he's throwing a lot. He's trying to inflict damage. He's trying to cut you open. So I always like that. But Chepe's pretty tough, and I think Damon Jackson, maybe in the 3rd round, I'd give Chepe an edge winning that round.
Yeah, I mean, Jackson's one of those guys that you always want to back as an underdog, because if there's one thing he's going to do, he's going to fight for your money. And he's going to go for his best win condition, which is the grappling.
All right, well, we've gotten to the main event, and I have to say, when I made this slide, I'm like, this might be the weirdest looking main event in recent history. Tybura's hair is just atrocious. And Spivac, man, it's like he may as well just this reference is going to go over a lot of people's head because I'm going to show my age here. But if he shaved his eyebrows, he could just sing for like Midnight Oil. And I think people would be really happy with him if he came out to Beds Are Burning. I think that. So like for 3 people that watch this show, you're going to understand this old timey song. I can see you looking at me like I have 9 heads. You have no idea what I'm talking about. So there was music in the 80s, believe it or not. Tybura plus 130. Spivac has gained some steam this week. Betting market's slowly moving on him. Once again, dude, we have a 3.5 total. I think this is back-to-back weeks where couldn't figure out if they wanted to make it 4.5 or 2.5. This is a rematch, obviously, hence the name of the card being Tybura versus Spivac, too. My question for you, is really kind of simple here. How much has he improved? He's a younger fighter. There's certainly things to like about Spivac. I mean, losing the Cyril Gane is losing the Cyril Gane. It's fine. How much has he improved for this matchup? And then I have a follow-up question depending on your answer.
My first thought was he's improved. Obviously, he's a young heavyweight. He's improved some, but I am trying to get a read, and I'm still kind of mulling it over of how much he actually has improved, because that's the big thing that everybody's going to talk about this week. It's, how washed is Tybura? How much better is Spivac? And to be honest with you, in my opinion, my answer is I have no idea how much better Tybura has gotten. He's older. He's a 38-year-old heavyweight. But has he looked severely regressed? I think he looks a little bit older. I think he looks a little bit slower. I think his cardio is not as good. But if you rewatch the first fight, I mean, I thought Spivac was largely, dominated in that fight, in the grappling, which is what Tybura wants to do in most of his fights. So he's probably going to take that path. And if Spivac hasn't improved to a considerable level, I feel like, it looks more or less the same. But it's hard to not look at Spivac's physique, look at, how much mature he looks, and kind of think he's made some improvements. But, has he really? I mean, a lot of people were, I had a huge position on Gane in the Gane fight because I thought it was like a big time levels fight. And I had people tell me that Spivac has improved a lot. And it once again, you have no idea. Like, he washes Lewis, who was like the checked out version of Derek Lewis.
That was the fight before the DeLima fight, right?
Yes, I believe so.
So he was setting up his next contract. It's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, so let me look. So after the Tybura fight, I mean, he beats Felipe, which was like a pretty decently close fight. He washed Vandera, had a competitive fight with Olynyk, bonked by Aspinall. Who cares? Greg Hardy,
And the Olynyk fight was weird because he didn't want to grapple, so that became a really weird low level boxing match. By the way, I love me some Alexei Olynyk. That's like just an all timer for me. I mean, that dude. You want to talk about a guy that would be fun to have a drink with? That dude would tell you some stories.
Now, I will say he did look a bit better against Sakai, but Sakai is like a pretty negative grappler, and he still got up off bottom after getting beat up a little bit and
Sakai was checked out. Now, it's Sakai's big losing streak where he was kind of checked out.
Yeah, and then Lewis. So it's like, yeah, he's gone on like a pretty nice run, but it's like Vandera, Olynyk, Hardy, Sakai, Derek Lewis. Man, I don't want to go out and say that he's improved a ton, but he is on a pretty long layoff between between the Gane fight and now. I'm sure he's motivated after, getting pretty much embarrassed, in my opinion, in that fight. So I think that it just turns out to me that this is a competitive, sloppy heavyweight fight at the end of the day. And he probably is making improvements, but in my opinion, it's really hard to gauge, to be honest. Just because you got to look at who he's fighting, where they're at in their career, and where they're headed at that point. And if he was making all these improvements that people are baking into these wins, he would have done a little bit better in the Gane fight. He would have at least had a moment of success if he was making all of these physical. If he put on, I've heard people tell me that he put on 20 pounds of muscle this week. Dude, you don't even know what 20 pounds of muscle looks like, bro. He has not put on 20 pounds of muscle. Because I know what that shit looks like. He ain't done that yet. He put on 20 pounds. That's fantastic. Good to him, because he's now a more filled out heavyweight. but he ain't put on 20 pounds of muscle. He would look freaking he would look huge. He doesn't. So he looks more filled out, more mature. But dude, 20 pounds of muscle, you'd be surprised what that would look like.
So my quick follow-up.
Ain't no way, bro. Ain't no way.
So my quick follow-up is just based on that. Despite the age difference, I mean, I personally would, as this fight goes on and we grow into like the third and the fourth and beyond, do you favor Tybura as soon as we get past that initial first couple of rounds of Spivac's athleticism?
No, because I don't think Tybura has great cardio either. He kind of just like he just kind of like keeps fights close as they get extended. You know what I mean? So he doesn't really like find a way to separate late in fights historically unless he's hitting takedowns. So that's pretty much how he won the second round of their first fight, was that he got a takedown and stayed on top. So if Spivac's not getting taken down, this is like the ugliest striking fight where Tybura is winging left hands and kicks and Spivac's trying to attempt to box. So I'm not even. Yeah. I bet you. I mean, if you're lining up a Tybura live bet after round one, like, oh man, we got him, and he doesn't hit a takedown, you're gonna be watching it just like pissed off the whole time to lose like a split.
I'm laying off this one completely. I've seen enough of Tybura's bad performances or uninspired performances, like the Volkov fight, the Blagoy fight. I'm starting to wonder, you mentioned if Prochnio hypnotizes people. I'm starting to wonder if like Blagoy is just a master hypnotist that gets these horrendous, hilarious 3-round fights. But I've seen enough of Tybura with some uninspired fights. The Tuivasa fight was an inspired performance. Sure, I don't see that path here. But so that's the thing. It's almost like Tybura gets bored. Like even the Romanov fight, and I literally had a Tybura split decision bet. It's one of my favorite bets I ever made. I can't believe that happened, because it should never happen, because either it should have been a 10-8 round one, Romanov, or the fight should have been stopped. So there's no reason I should even have gotten to that point to get Tybura decision or whatever. So, but anyway.
Now all I'm going to say is that is kind of the path that Spivac has here, though. He's like typically like a take you down and like pound you out guy. If that's how the Romanov fight played out, where, Tybura just took like a bunch of damage and just stayed in the fight, we could see some hilarious shit like that here too, where people have like a Spivac bet and then like, he's improved so much, watch him fuck this guy up.
And he does that. 1,200. He's minus 1,200 live after like 2 rounds.
Yeah, gasses himself out a little bit, and it's just like the most hilarious like heavyweight slop fest for the next 4 rounds.
And Tybura wins all these rounds with like 13 strikes to 4.
Yeah.
And like,
or
the meaningless takedown with 15 seconds in the round, where they'll be like, "Oh, he just secured the round." Like, dude, can we get past this myth? You're not securing a round anymore by getting a takedown with 15 seconds left. No one cares anymore, man. Like,
yeah, I mean, if it's like a 50-50, if it's like a completely coin flip round and you hit a takedown, then it's like, oh, okay, well, that was the only solid thing that happened. But
that's why Cormier kills me with this. It's like, no, dude, the takedown did not. It's the equivalent for our football fans of Merrill Hodge being on TV and being like, you know what this team's problem is? They don't run the ball 55 times a game. Dude, no one runs the ball 55 times a game anymore. Like, not even Navy. Like, not even Navy runs it for that. They'll air it out a few times here and there. Like, the game's changed, man. Like, and also, while we're on the subject of Cormier, hey, buddy, it's not always tight. It's fine, man. You don't have to say it's tight every time. Take a drink.
I know. There were so many fights this weekend. I can't remember what fight it was where I think it was, you know what it was? It was the Jai Herbert fight, where everybody that I knew in one of my Discords was like, oh man, the leg kick's really getting to him. Oh, and the commentary's like, oh man, I really think he's affected. And then I turn and watch my TV and I'm going, he looks fine.
He's landing
Like,
he's landing every jab he threw, like the whole fight. He's fine.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I get that he's landing some calf kicks, but it's like I'd like to see somebody like be moving poorly, you know what I mean, and like have a response to it. But the dude's moving fine. He's just landing some calf kicks. It's like and so yeah, I mean, I agree.
They
with
made
the commentary.
They didn't, like, to them, the leg kicks that Bedoya was landing were the exact same as the one Kawe Fernandez were landing on Yaya, where he couldn't walk, where he was just getting disabled, and like every kick was like echoing throughout the building. And they're like, "Oh, those look pretty good." You think the guy can barely move? Like,
yeah,
like that's
Bedoya,
what you're talking about. Like, and I thought Herbert showed some toughness there too. Like those kicks were landing, but he showed some toughness. He did check a couple of them too, but
yeah.
Anyway,
but you're right. It's like Kawe's like literally lighting this dude's calf up and can't move, and then Bedoya's hitting him with like the inside of his foot, slapping him, and they're like, "Oh man, that's getting."
He's winding up like he's trying to kick like playing kickballs, just drilling home runs. All right, man, we made it. We spent an hour on this third card because
Dogfather an hour too long.
We're committed to excellence. That's why we did this. Tell the good people the usual where they can find you, because I don't really have much to promote this week.
I don't have anything to promote at all. I'll be in the Big Brain Discord. Rumblings are in the works.
Shout out Big Steve.
Shout out Big Steve. And all of my good friends in there. But rumblings are churning for me being a part of a Dana White Contender Series breakdown on a weekly basis as the season rolls around. Contracts are being finalized. I need a signing bonus for obvious reasons. I'm a very busy guy. But yeah, excited for Dana White Contender Series coming up in the next couple weeks. Couple regional, only really one or two regionals I'll bet this week. But most importantly, UFC 305 is next week to look forward to, everybody. It's a much better card than this. And a lot of times we have like the lull of like a really shitty Apex card. And then the next week you have a great card. So you're going to be on Twitter this week and everybody's going to be like, this is the worst card ever. Everything sucks. I'm going to complain because you have nothing better to do with your life. Shut up. Shut up. Dude, nobody cares. The UFC doesn't care if you complain on Twitter. They're not going to change anything. Shut up. Go read a book. Go touch some grass. Go outside. Go watch some tape. Go try to do something else. Watch
they're
the
going to power slap no matter what we say. They don't care.
You're gonna watch the card this week, even if you're complaining on Twitter. Shut up.
Sure.
We have a great card next week. Suck it up. Move on. And enjoy the fights. Thank you. That's all I have to say. I mean, God, if I go on Twitter one more time and have to listen to somebody complain about something.
So I only have one scheduled show, and that's Thursday midnight with my life partner, Monk Maddox, the happy hour. That being said, I am probably going to do a second show this week, sometime Friday. I'm going to be doing a weekly series that I think is interesting, and it hopefully will be content that it doesn't have a short shelf life. So it's another part of this series. But basically looking at, if you're going to spend money on a capping service, on a Discord, like what are the things to look for, like value and things like that. And it's coming from like an old chunk of coal like me who remembers the Tandy as a really fancy computer, like a 386 when it was the top model. So I try to give you my perspective as technology has come into this and influx of information. But that would be Friday. And then next week, the Premier League begins. So I will have a regular Friday show with soccer. But guys, be very careful with your bankrolls this week. Like Dogfather said, save it for next week. Just enjoy the fights. And we will see you next Monday.